Hello and welcome to the BA News Show every Friday at 5 PM with your host Rich, that's me, and Tabs.
Hiya.
This week we have 3 stories for you. One's almost like a double header. We're going to start with some interesting stuff from Sony. We're going to follow on by some interesting news coming out from Rockstar about a changing culture. And then anyone who's followed the recent weeks, we had some Resi 4 information, possibly rumours of Resident Evil 4 Remake coming. Well, we've got some more firming up on those details, so look out for that to come. But before we carry on, Tabs, what have you been playing this week?
Another week of mostly Resident Evil 3 Remake. We finished the completion, as you'll see on the channel. BArcadians, please tune in. Apologies for some of my amateur kind of gameplay on that. Although I didn't do too bad, did I, Rich?
Yeah, you were alright. Good, mate. Really good.
And we did cut some of the death scenes just to try and make it a little bit more streamlined than it came across. And we're actually working on doing a speed run to achieve an S rank on normal mode on that as we speak, aren't we, Rich? So
we are, yes. We did the first part of that last night and actually smashing it.
It went really well. You were helping to coach the run basically by focusing us on the next part of the story or the next kind of plot beat that we needed to hit.
Absolutely.
But what about you, Rich? What have you been into?
This week. So obviously I've been watching and helping you play Resident Evil 3 Remake, which has been really good fun. Really been fun to be involved in that with you. More Gran Turismo, although a little bit less this week. Got really into it last week, but a little bit less. I only played it 2 or 3 times this week. But actually, and some people may have seen it if they've seen some of my live streams that I've started up, but I've started God of War, which Tabs lent me about, I don't know, a year ago, and I still haven't started it. Well, I have now. So I've basically been playing that and really enjoying it. Tabs warned me it was going to be very difficult, and he wasn't wrong. So yeah,
you need to prepare yourself for God of War. You need to put a bit of a flak jacket on to go with that. It will ease, and especially once you start the kind of RPG aspects and upgrading Kratos. But yeah, early doors, you've got to just grin and bear it and just keep your head down, keep learning. But I think you'll love it, mate. It's not quite that flourishing open world of something like Breath of the Wild. It's a bit more contained, but along with that you get a bit more of a honed narrative experience, and they do some really wonderful things within the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, it gave me, so far I'm I don't know, a couple of hours in, maybe 3 hours in, it's given me a very feeling of Uncharted with some mystical elements. That's how it's come across so far.
Yeah, nice way of putting that.
But I know you do move on to some like grandiose bosses, I think, don't you, Tab? So then does it then become a bit of a Shadow of the Colossus element as well?
I suppose, yeah, there can be a slight element to that. Look, very much like you say, it's all very fantastical if compared with Uncharted. But I just think there's so much creativity within the game, and the way it plays out, the pacing felt really good, really satisfying to me. And there's something for everybody. You've got the combat, you've got the story, the narrative, but also some of the puzzles as well are quite ingenious, and they develop. And I think you'll enjoy those, Rich, personally.
Yeah, absolutely. You know how much I like a puzzle in a game, so that sounds great. So enough waffle, let's move on to this week's proper news stories. So we're going to start this week with Sony have decided they're going to try and encourage social distancing. Get my words out. So as we know, most of the world in some form or other is under some form of lockdown, be it you can only go out for essential items, or maybe you can't go to work. So to try and help this, Sony are offering 2 free games. And now this seems to be completely unlinked to their PlayStation Plus membership, although it's unconfirmed at this point. But basically they're going to be releasing free Uncharted Collection, which is actually 3 games in one, as anyone who's played the Uncharted collection will know, and Journey. Now, I don't actually know a lot about the game Journey. Do you know much about that, Tabs?
Yeah, it's sort of an indie game, which is very... it's one of these sort of high concept games, and it's more of a an experience more than anything. It's not quite a walking simulator. It's got more to it than that, but it's very much a
so it's not Death Stranding.
No, no, but it's like it's an arty game that it's almost conveys a message as part of the experience of it, if you like. But I think it's quite a short experience, so it's not too lengthy. But it's certainly it's got its fans out there, and it was released to critical acclaim as well. So I think you'll enjoy it if you give it the chance.
Oh, that's cool then. So the game's going to be available from April 15th, which a couple of days prior to this video dropping, 8 PM PST time, or 11 PM
EST.
And then,
yeah.
Sorry, or obviously it'll be April the 16th, 4 AM at British Standard Time, and they'll be available all the way through until May the 5th. So that's cool, and apparently Sony have confirmed, and this comes from Tech Radar, that the games will be yours to keep after this period. So there won't be any need to give them back after the time or anything. So that's really cool. They've also announced they have pledged $10 million to support indie development or developers through this tough time, where perhaps they won't have the capital to see them through these times where maybe their staff are at home and they can't come in to complete the work, etc.
Yeah, I think that's a really lovely gesture, isn't it? I don't know quite what $10 million will look like in terms of how far it will stretch, but either way, it's lovely to see a big, company like Sony coming out and putting its arm around the little guys that are really important, aren't they, to the culture, to us gamers at home. We have a lot of fun from indie experiences, and we see a lot of emerging talents coming through the indie kind of scene. So good on Sony for that.
Absolutely. A good news story. There's a lot of bad news stories around throughout the world, not just in gaming, so that's a good news story definitely there. Another news from Sony, and this is more worrying, and we've actually touched on this a little bit on the BA News in previous weeks, that it's looking like, and this comes from the Verge via a Bloomberg report, that there'll be fewer PS5s available on launch than were available for the PS4 back in 2013. Sony is planning to ship 5 or 6 million units through to the end of March next year, and the PS4 in a similar time had 7.5 million consoles sold. So that sort of suggests that maybe they're going to be a couple of million short. So it's interesting to know that. I mean, there is some suggestion that there'll be less demand early on for the console because it's probably going to have a higher price than the PS4, which they're sort of suggesting is one of the reasons why they're going to be producing less. But
that is interesting, isn't it? That they are saying that it's not necessarily to do with this COVID-19 pandemic. It's more to do with the fact that they just don't see, there'll be that much of an appetite or a demand for them based on a price which could be looking around $500 or maybe 500 quid in the UK.
Yeah, I mean the latest things I've seen is it's going to be between $500 and $550, and normally with these things they don't necessarily convert to the UK, so that will be whatever the equivalent is in pounds. Normally it's a similar kind of, so if it's $500,
numerical value.
Yeah. So I expect that's sort of what we're going to be looking at. And that seems like a lot of money for a console, don't get me wrong. But when we hear and talk about the hardware that's inside, actually on the face of it, and me and Tabs know this quite well, given we've got two Alienware laptops, that's probably represents a bargain for the technology that's inside it.
Yeah, definitely. And it might even equate to Sony still taking a loss, even at a high price like that. But I think we've got to hear about the games, haven't we? At the end of the day, we need to know about the games. And if there's nothing releasing that tickles your fancy, then maybe you do wait.
Absolutely. So moving on, Tabs, tell us about Rockstars.
Yeah, so some interesting news has come out. I think it was originally a Kotaku report, and I picked this up from PC Gamer. But basically, there's been some sort of leaks that management have come out talking to the employees and suggesting that the whole crunch culture that's obviously they've had a lot of bad press for, especially lingering around Red Dead Redemption 2, is on its way out, perhaps, in the company. So I think it's head of publishing in Rockstar, Jennifer Colby, perhaps. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. There's going to be a lot of work undertaken across the company, and they're going to be laying out plans for the year, including flexible schedules, management, leadership training, surveys amongst employees, and just basically they're trying to improve all of their internal infrastructure to alleviate this last-minute crunching that seems to be rife in the industry, and certainly a big part of their the pipeline of their recent games. So, and a bolt-on to that as well, apparently that's also going to be potentially a factor or have ramifications in the release of GTA 6. So they're actually looking at managing the scope of GTA 6 to kind of fit that new structure they're working on, which could end up looking something like a smaller, more moderately sized release, which they then look to develop almost as a game as a service model. So they're adding on bolt-ons DLC in piecemeal, essentially. I mean, what do you think to that, Rich?
Well, the first part of that story, fantastic. It's great to see them taking on criticism, you would say, from staff or ex-employees. So it's brilliant that they've taken that on board and gone, yeah, there is a cultural problem within the company and we need to address that and move forward and give people a better working environment. So that's fantastic. However, the second part saying rather than produce these incredible games that are just monsters that we all love to play, they're going to scale them back a bit, and that seems self-defeating. Surely if everyone's under the time crunch to get stuff done, we'll employ more people.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, obviously there has to be a cause and effect, doesn't there? But it seems to push back in that way, essentially on the experience at the end of it. Well, yeah, from a gamer's perspective, I'm not thrilled by that. And like you say, surely they've got plenty of money to employ more staff, or, you know, we know that they take their time in development, just take a bit more time over it maybe.
This is it. What would you rather? Would you rather a scaled back product that maybe doesn't meet our expectations in terms of what we would expect from a new GTA 6, which is a quadruple A title that we are all hotly anticipating to be incredible again? Do you want that scaled back, or would you rather they employ more staff? I mean, I want the people who work there to have a good working environment, absolutely. But I would rather they either employ more staff or, like you say, just take more time. Take another year, take another 2 years. Produce the product you want to produce without compromise.
This is it. I mean, we really need to know across the industry what the crunch culture is like there, don't we? Because seemingly not everybody suffers from it. I think it is an inherent part of the industry, but to varying degrees perhaps. Surely there's another way of achieving a better culture without having such a profound, well, we don't know yet, but potentially profound impact on the products at the end of it.
Absolutely.
But another interesting piece from this, Rich, is that the suggestion that GTA 6 is quite early on in its development. I don't think that's fact, but the way things have been worded, I understand there's a hint that it's not that far into development.
That begs the big question that begs is, if they're not all in currently developing GTA 6 or haven't been for a while, what are they developing? Because there's obviously something in the works now. Red Dead Redemption was, we're 2 years out from Red Dead Redemption now. So what's their next game to fill their gap between, say GTA 6 is in early development and it's another 3 or 4 years away? What's going in this block between the two? So I think that begs more questions than it answers, really.
Or is that just part of the way they plan, and the part of their pre-production of a game? Because they do make these colossal masterpieces, and it must take a lot of thought and planning that goes into it. So perhaps it's just a case of their, more slower pipeline for making products. It's hard to say for sure, but disappointing a little bit, because we've been hearing rumours, haven't we, Rich, that there was all sorts abound. Could be a holiday release for GTA 6, could be videos dropping anytime now, and this seems to put that to the sword a bit, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and as we're always chasing these shadows in the games industry, this could just be them telling us exactly what they want us to hear, put us off the scent, and then big bombshell GTA 6 trailer drops. We're all in awe of it.
Exactly.
So we'll watch this one with bated breath. But moving us on, you've heard us speak at length recently about Resident Evil and what's upcoming. We spoke, I think, last week's news piece about the newly sort of announced Resident Evil 8, which is going to be called Resident Evil Village, I believe.
Oh, well, we shouldn't say announced though, Rich. It's been leaked from their kind of behind the scenes forum, if you like. But yeah, it seems to be dead on, doesn't it? But it's not officially announced yet. We'll
say all but announced then.
Yeah, that's a good way.
So we think we know that's going to be Resident Evil Village. A correction there, thanks Tabs. But as part of that we tagged onto last week, that we thought potentially there would be more Resident Evil remakes in the works, and we spoke at length about possibly Resident Evil 4. We'd like to see Code Veronica. Well, it looks like we have some information coming out from VGC.
Just Golem, I think, was the original game leaker potentially. I think he's got some credibility when it comes to leaks around Resident Evil as well.
Okay.
And yeah, he's pointing that there could be a Resident Evil 4 remake that's been greenlit, due to arrive sometime in 2022, essentially.
And that's really interesting because we think we're going to see potentially this new Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 8, whatever it's going to be called, in 2021, and that will make a lot of sense then. That they've released Nemesis this year. They'll go Resident Evil 8 next year, and the following year they'll go potentially this Resident Evil 4 remake. So that's really interesting. It does show actually make a lot of sense, which is something that you have to look for in these rumours and stuff. For
fans, I mean, Shinji Mikami, who was the original director of Resident Evil 4, apparently he's not going to be at the helm of this one. He's given it his blessing. We understand he's working on another project. And he's actually given some pointers as well to development, which is encouraging. And what is good from what we've heard from these rumours is that apparently the team working on the Resident Evil 4 remake is a much larger team with a much longer development cycle than both Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes. So, I mean, Resident Evil 2 was obviously fabulous. 3, I think the critical response and the fan response has been a bit mixed. Especially, we can definitely say ourselves, Rich, it's a short game, isn't it? There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely.
And it seems like there was some corners cut there. So, I'm very pleased as a big fan of 4, and I know it's got a massive place in fans' hearts across the franchise, the series, that it seems like they're going to throw everything at this and make sure it gets the respect it deserves, which I think is a good thing. But I mean, from you, Rich, do you think this is a good thing? Are you falling on the side of people who perhaps think it doesn't need a remake? Where do you lie on it?
Well, I actually do think this game probably doesn't need a remake. I thought it was good when it first came out, I believe on the GameCube, and then as it's subsequently been ported since then to other systems, namely the Switch, Tabs.
Yeah, there's been a Switch remaster. Yeah. I think it's had remasters on the PS4, Xbox.
I think that's a worry for me. Why remake a game that's already been put out on all of these different systems? Why not go for the one that hasn't done that? And that would have been Resident Evil 3, for instance, which they've just done. But surely the next one that hasn't been done lots and lots is Code Veronica. That's the one I want to see. So it makes no sense. Maybe it's got a really big fans out there, and they're crying out for it. Maybe that's something I've missed.
Maybe I would guess, mate, that they've just looked at the sales, the commercial interests, and that is that Resident Evil 4, I'm sure, sold a lot more than perhaps Code Veronica did on the Dreamcast, and subsequently, the port was it to the PlayStation. Because it felt more like a spin-off than a proper sequel, and that obviously numerically Resident Evil 3, it was like Resident Evil Code Veronica. That's part of the reason for it. So they're probably making the safer bet by going for 4. But I think, like you say, for me, there's definitely an element there that it still holds up. It's obviously not the prettiest game in the world because it's old tech, but it still holds up to this day. So they really do need to, if they're going to remake it, they need to be really reimagining it for me. And there are things they can improve. It was very cheesy, very corny. Some of the exposition was not always the best in this particular game. So I think there are things they could improve, but they really need to make a better go of it than perhaps what we saw in Resident Evil 3 Remake.
I think ultimately for me, and don't get me wrong, I like action games, but I like the thinking man's action game. I like where you've got to put some thought into puzzles and that kind of thing. And I think Resident Evil 2 tread a nice line, the remake of that, treaded a nice line in that respect. And that's one of the things I really loved about Code Veronica, because there were puzzles in there, and that seemed to be what when we played it together, we were bouncing around a bit. And I feel like that's where Resident Evil 3 loses itself. It's all action. It's like a sprint through an action sequence to the end for me, which is enjoyable in itself, but it's not the game I personally go to look for. And I guess in some respects I look at Resident Evil 4 in a similar vein. That is probably, I would say, a longer game than Resident Evil 3 from the pieces I've
definitely
played
longer
through with it. But I feel like that lacks that same sort of balance between like puzzle elements and the action elements, and that again veers more to the all-on action type game.
No, I agree, mate. 4 was definitely this sense of you're on your big fun sliding through the experience, set piece after set piece. Well, they introduced QTEs, didn't they, in Resident Evil 4 as well. So I do get the same sense, and it worked for it.
Yeah.
But maybe they could restore some of the balance of previous vibes of Resident Evil games, but in this reimagining of it. I mean, they'd have to be careful with the pacing, and obviously they've got to respect fans of the original. But yeah, I'd definitely like to see them take some risks, at least in the development of it, rather than their approach to Nemesis, which has left a little bit of a sour taste in some people's mouths, hasn't it?
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I've thoroughly enjoyed playing it with you, Tabs. I really have enjoyed playing it. It's just, if I look at it and think I wouldn't go out and purchase that personally, because it's all action. I wouldn't get what I really wanted from it in that respect. Whereas Resident Evil 2, I feel like, although, I mean, we spent one weekend and pretty much played the whole game pretty much together. If we hadn't have done that and I'd seen you playing it, I might have gone out and bought that game. So, yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, we'll have to see whether this rumour is fully announced in the weeks to come.
That's it. So, yeah, some nice juicy pieces this week, eh, Rich?
Definitely, yeah. It's nice to have some slightly more positive things in the news. You can start to get bogged down at the moment with delays and cancellations and all sorts, so it's nice to have some more uplifting gaming news. And that brings us to the end. So if you have enjoyed it today, the BA News Show, definitely give us a like, and if you definitely want to see more from us, then subscribe to the channel and click that bell so you get notifications of all our new content. And I think that's all we've got time for. Another one for the archive.
Stamped and completed.